nerd.
All right, we're ready to click the blue go live button. Click, and we're live. It is Monday, May 10th, 2021, 5:02 p.m. I am back in Washington. I'm not on a train. Scott is still in the same unevenly lit room in New York. We are going to be joined by this gentleman, Herb Lin, in a few minutes. See, there's Herb. He's getting ready to join us, and we're going to talk ransomware. But I have to give you all the follow up of my bet with Kate yesterday. Kate told me she challenged me to find a morel mushroom in DC, and I took up that challenge. And I took it very seriously. I want you to understand how seriously I took the the morelling in DC thing, and so I want to walk you through what I did, and I think it'll help you understand how seriously I took this. Can you all see my screen now? Scott, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can. Yes, I'm sorry. I can see your screen. It's not that you haven't started the slideshow.
That's
yet,
right. I'm gonna start the slideshow now.
Yeah, no, it's working perfectly.
Good. All right. So I thought it would be useful to frame this in terms of how morelling in DC is different from what Scott and Kate did the other day. Driving out into New Jersey. There are some advantages and disadvantages to doing it the way they did. There are some advantages and disadvantages to doing it the way I did. And I want to be candid and thoughtful about those and, really explain them to you. So Scott and Kate drove out to a secret location in New Jersey to find morels. I also, went to a secret location. In this case, it was the Whole Foods market near my house. You shouldn't try this location because I bought actually the 1 pack of morels that they had. So now.
Okay, so I would just say personally, I would never have thought of looking there.
Right. Clearly, you drove out to New Jersey to find morels.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, if it was just going to Whole Foods, I got one down the block.
Right.
Wow. Okay, that's very out of the box.
Yeah, I was thinking out of the box. Now, Scott and David warned me that morels can be hard to find, and that even when you know they're there, they can be difficult to spot. Now, I want to point out this was a really perceptive point because I went to the mushroom section and there were no morels among the fresh mushrooms. And then I went and tried to look for, the dried mushrooms, and there were no dried mushrooms that were visible. And so Scott and David actually told us the other day on the show that you need an expert to help find them even when they're there, just to spot them. And this turned out to be exactly right. So I asked one of the store attendants, and he showed me where the dried mushrooms were. Even then, I had to look behind a pillar to find the morels. They were really well hidden. So I really want to give credit to Scott and David for telling how difficult they were. All right, so I finally found them. And let's talk about the differences between the morels that Scott and David and Kate found and the advantages to the ones that they found, which is these were not fresh. They are dried morels. And I didn't get the satisfaction of picking them myself.
Well, you picked them. You found them behind the pillar.
I did find them behind the pillar, but I think it would have been more thrilling if I had found them, wet after a downpour or something like you guys didn't. But here are the pros. This little pack of morels cost $16.47. There was some tax there too, I think. But I didn't have to pay $160 for a zip car, which crapped out on me. I didn't get soaking wet. Also, this is important, guys. These are real morels, not false morels. They actually work. And so if you think about it in efficiency terms, if you estimate that there's about 15 morels in there, that's about $1 per morel, versus Scott and Kate's morelling expedition they didn't actually find any morels. They actually, so the cost per morel is infinite. Finally, there's another big advantage to my system, which is that Kate has to eat a bug, because she said she would eat a bug if I found any morels. All right, so this brings me to the other big pro, which is the only bug involved in this exercise is the one that Kate is going to eat. There are no other bugs involved in this morel. I checked it carefully for ants. I looked at all the morels. I chopped them up very carefully. No sign of ants. So I got 15 morels, $1 each, and no ants, and you guys got one false morel with a lot of ants for $160. I think the efficiency argument, particularly if you figure in the bugs, is weighting in my favor. Okay, so then I got home with a package of morels. I had no idea what to do with them, but I had this old Pinot Noir that's been sitting around. And so I figured I could at least be pretentious and reconstitute them with Pinot Noir. So it's important when you reconstitute morels to use Pinot Noir, because that's what I had lying around. Then I remembered David Golub's recipe, which calls for morels sautéed in butter with shallots. I didn't have any shallots. But I had an onion and some garlic, so I decided butter, onion, garlic, and Pinot Noir reconstituted morels were going to be the thing. So you chop everything up. Notice here, lots of chopped morels, no bugs, not even one bug.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of, so far I grant everything, just also, but like that's not a very high resolution picture. I'm just saying.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's just my phone.
Okay.
All right, but then I just want to show you here what I did. My son actually made this wonderful chive butter. So I don't have shallots, but I do have chive butter to do it all in.
Right. This is in lieu of shallots.
In lieu of shallots, yeah. And then, so you got your sautéed onions and your garlic here. And then I have some basil that I grew, so I added that, I'm sort of proud of that. Here's the basil hasn't shown up yet. So here's the basil, which I picked and chopped myself, Scott.
Really? You picked and chopped yourself? You mean you picked it from the produce section at Whole Foods?
A plant that I grew. Yeah, this is, and then you drop in the morels. Here they are. We're sautéing the morels here, and this is the part where I'm now ahead of you, because in all the part with the morelling, you didn't actually get to cook a morel, but here I am cooking.
We didn't cook. I just say you're right. We didn't get to cook a real morel. That's right. True.
That brings.
We had a fake morel. I just want to say that. So it's not like we didn't have a morel. It just was fake.
Yeah.
Just go ahead.
So that just brings me to the final major advantage of my approach over yours, which is that at the end I do get to eat morels, which I don't think you and Kate really got to do. That's true. First of all, can you report on how it tastes? They are lovely. They go very well with bourbon. that kind of earthy flavor.
Yeah, I tend not to like to mix my liquor. You know, I just want to say, well, we have Herb here, and we want to talk about the ransomware, and we don't want. And the thing is, I just want. I'm sorry. I feel very emotional right now, because I'm the new guy here. I know. I get it.
And I'm picking on you.
Well, I don't mind even that you did it. It's Kate. I feel like Kate, Kate always says to me that the show is like a trust fall. Like you fall back and you just know that the other hosts are going to catch you. And I just feel like yesterday she let me fall.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think, yeah.
But
I
don't think we should
don't
say
tell her.
anything to
Don't tell her I said that.
No,
don't tell her I
say
said that.
to her about it.
Yeah. Don't say, Herb, don't say anything to her. I really.
All of this is really
just like I'm new here.
It's just like a really long-winded way of saying that we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, there's that before Woody Allen was canceled, he had that wonderful joke about how it was a sad day for his family because his father was laid off from his job. And he was replaced by a little machine this big that did everything his father did, only it did it much better. And the sad part was that his mother went out and bought one. And that's kind of the way Scott must feel about Whole Foods right now,
I do. But other things have happened in the world, have they not?
That's correct. And we're not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have Herb Lin to talk about not morels, but ransomware. Herb, we have kept you waiting plenty long enough. Welcome to the show. I would say we're not usually this buffoonish, except that we actually are.
Always.
Yes, I believe that.
So, meanwhile, is any natural gas getting to the East Coast?
As far as I know, it still is.
So what?
I can. Yeah, I have gas.
So what's the deal with this big ransomware attack? How afraid of it should we be?
Well, I mean, it just points out that that something that all of us in cybersecurity have been complaining about for years and years and years, which is that going after physical infrastructure and critical infrastructure of energy and so on could happen. Now, as far as we know, at this point, this is an attack that the attack itself did not disable the pipeline. The company shut it down because it was afraid that of possible compromise to operations, which could, of course, cause physical damage and so on. So they detected an intrusion. They detected an intrusion, right? That there were ransomware screens that were put up onto their computers. They said
they detected it
right.
When it said we've encrypted your computer.
That's right. And they did a sensible thing to shut it down to see what the hell was happening. So it was a choice. It was a voluntary choice by the company to shut it down. Probably the wise thing to do, but as far as we know, the attack itself did not compromise the ICS systems.
Okay, so since you're obviously an expert on the subject, and members of our audience may not be brought up to speed on industrial control systems, I was wondering if you could talk about the distinction between like the control side and the corporate side, because
sure.
my understanding is that this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that this ransomware attack was on the corporate side rather than the control side. So it's not, at least this attack is not as scary as it may sound, but maybe you could talk about that.
Well, sure. So any modern piece of infrastructure that interacts with the physical world, like a pipeline or something, the pipeline, it is controlled by computers. If the ICS, industrial control systems. And these things do things like they turn a valve on and off, and they regulate pressure and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, the company also uses information technology to do billing and administrative functions and all that sort of stuff. And there is no, in principle, reason why the information technology side of the house, it does the business side, the administrative side, the financial side, and so on, has to talk to the operational side. That is the computers that are talking to the valves in the pipe. There's no, I mean, they don't have to be connected, but almost always they are. Why would they be connected? Well, one reason is, for example, you might want to bill based on the amount of gas that is being passed from one point to another, right? You get a bigger bill if more gas is passed, and at that point it helps to have a flow sensor in the pipeline, and it gives information to the information technology, and they calculate an appropriate bill. I mean, that's just an example of something.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
And so the point is that these two networks, that the systems that do the operational side and the systems that do the information technology side, the administrative side, they do talk to each other. They often talk to each other, even though there's no, for efficiency reasons, not because it's a logical necessity, but it's a practical, it's a practical thing to do. Go ahead, Ben.
So there's a feature of this that has puzzled me for a while, which is if you take, on the one hand, these critical infrastructure providers, and on the other hand, the financial services industry, one of them has made an appropriate system level investment in cybersecurity over the years, and the other has sort of lagged behind in a profound and deep way. And the fact that ransomware hackers can compromise these machines puts them on a par with the city of Baltimore, and institutions that really aren't what we would think of as sort of cutting edge in cybersecurity. And my question is, if you're a manager for Morgan Stanley, why are you so much more adept in this space than if you're a manager for a major petroleum shipping company that is reliant on industrial control systems, knows what we were able to do with Stuxnet, has been hearing people like you warn about this for 20 years, 30 years. Why are the shareholders of these companies not kicking these people's asses like they're, I don't know, I could get into flogging metaphors, but why is the pressure so different by sector?
Well, there's no good evidence, as far as I can tell, that a major breach of something like this actually affects long-term stock prices. So
well, why not?
Well, that part I do not understand. But if you're a manager at Morgan Stanley, I think that the answer to that question is that the hacks that come into you, they directly affect. I mean, what they do is they steal money, right? And you can measure money pretty easily. it's not clear how you would value how would you, there's no continuous loss of money in this pipeline hack, right? It's a big lump. They're asking for, this is a made up number, $50 million is a made up number, okay? But there's no continuous drain on you. Whereas if you improve cybersecurity in the financial industry, there are certain routes that you can turn off. So I know that some years ago, the financial industry had certain safety precautions, security precautions in place, ready to go, but they just said, at the level that we're experiencing theft now from these mechanisms, it's not worth it yet. When it becomes worth it, we'll deploy. And that there is no comparable metric of loss for the pipeline company.
Okay. So isn't the difference just that the consumer protection law in the United States puts the costs of fraud on the financial institution, making them liable? And so therefore, for the banks, they've had to internalize their costs for the last zillion years. And so therefore, they're really good at security because they're liable. That's why, like, when you get a fraud alert, they're really good at fraud alerts because the credit cards and the banks are going to hold it. Right. And when it comes to the pipelines and industrial control systems, shareholders generally are not. I mean, it's very hard to sue these utilities. I mean, they're highly regulated, and it's very hard to sue them. And they're not. I mean, as you know, is like liability for anything outside the financial industry is almost non-existent. So therefore, it's like they don't have the same kind of financial incentives. I think it's just illegal.
I would no disagreement with me on that point. I'm personally in favor of that kind of liability for breaches of this nature.
But isn't that so? I mean, I want to play devil's advocate for a moment, which is maybe it's not that big a problem. You have these industrial control systems that their shareholders occasionally have to pay some ransom. And in fact, the oil may stop for a short period of time. You may have small disruptions in service, but basically it's just a tax on the system. And the only real problem in that, if the companies are willing to internalize the costs, is I suppose it raises service delivery costs a little bit. And moreover, I think we can assume that if gangs of ransomware hackers can get in, that foreign state actors are pervasively in the systems, which has other national security implications. But maybe, why shouldn't we regard it as just a fairly manageable problem?
I think that we do. I think as a practical matter, we do regard it as a manageable problem because nothing happens.
But you don't.
Well, there are several concerns. Okay, one is that the attack introduces a whole lot of uncertainty, and I don't know how long it's going to take for those supplies to start running again. Okay, so if it were just a question of paying a regular tax to would-be ransomers, ransomware people, to keep the pipeline running, okay, maybe you could do that. Okay, now that would get you into all sorts of the FBI will say, no, you're going to encourage them, you're going to encourage more stuff to be attacked and so on. Never mind that for a moment. I mean, it's a real problem, but never mind that for a moment. And so you get a lot of, you could make the argument that it is just a tax, a drag on the system. The second point is that as people move, they try to squeeze out efficiencies out of just-in-time delivery and so on. I mean, this obviously disrupts just-in-time delivery. And to the extent that you have supplies sitting around waiting to buffer the shock of it, then you're okay. But people don't like that. People like the efficiencies of just-in-time. And all trends seem to be moving in that direction. Now, I happen not to like just-in-time for exactly this reason. But it's undeniable that there are efficiencies. Just-in-time depends on your system working like no pun intended, a well-oiled machine. And when it glitches up on you, you're screwed. Maybe you can tolerate being screwed for a few days, but could if this lasts for a week or that's probably okay. But a couple of months, I don't think you could tolerate it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can actually wring our hands a lot about ransomware and DDoS attacks on the power grid and all that stuff. But I mean, like, natural disasters, kind of throw out. I mean, just think about what happened in Texas. The scale of that, because of weather, was extraordinarily high, and the costs of this are relatively private and relatively low. I mean, it's not even really affecting the price of gasoline.
So, Scott, do you take the view then that ransomware is just not that big a deal?
No, ransomware is a huge. I'm sorry. No, I know ransomware is a huge deal. Like, so you have to distinguish between like ransomware, which is this a kind of malware which shuts down the usability of a network. I mean, this is really bad when they do it to hospitals, when they do it to municipalities, and do it to power grids. I mean, this is all bad. The question is, like, how vulnerable are we to critical infrastructure cyber attacks? It seems like in the history of the world, there have been 3 deaths because of a cyber attack on critical infrastructure, because of a cyber attack. And so, despite the fact that it's obviously a very important thing to worry about, I think it often gets hyped, and it seems scarier than any particular event is. I guess that would be kind of just a point I would want to make.
I think it is. I think there's no question that what you're saying is true. On the other hand, we're worried about people are worried about the future. The fact that it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean, excuse me, that it won't happen in that much more serious stuff that won't happen in the future.
No, absolutely. It's just that people get scared by the unknown. And part of the thing that people should know about this is that, first of all, it wasn't the operational side, the control side, it was the corporate side. They shut it down out of abundance of caution. And even it seems to have been some kind of crime as a service infrastructure that they were running. And so, like, some dopes, we don't know who did it, but somebody else paid them money to use this infrastructure.
That's right.
Yeah, it all seems just less scary if you just kind of know it's a bunch of people using some service run by Russian cyber criminals and attacked one side of the thing. It seems a little less bad to me.
Well, I think go
ahead, Herb.
No, less bad than what?
Than Die Hard 4.
Well, I think that, this is this is not a casus belli. I don't think anybody nobody would go to war over this.
On the other hand, I do think people would consider the vulnerability of industrial control center systems that control major oil flows to the East Coast to be a significant security concern that shouldn't be subject to ransom.
Yeah, absolutely. That's of course right. That's of
It
course right.
seems to me to be the starting place. Okay, well, one of the cool things about In Lieu of Fun is that we have audience members who know a shitload about the subjects in question. So I'm bringing on Deirdre Connolly to ask whatever she wants and steer the conversation in whatever direction she wants to take it in.
Hi. I think someone already asked this in the chat. Do we have an indication if this was phishing-based, social engineering, a 0 day, such as Eternal Blue? Eternal Blue's just out in the wild. So what was once a closely guarded national security secret is now just water for ransomware attacks. And then second, I just finished Nicole Perloff's book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, which actually has a nice epilogue of possible recommendations for policy. One of the ones that seems to be something to try is to incentivize bare minimum security standards of any company, but especially in this case, critical infrastructure. Things like two-factor authentication, well-patched systems, and getting pen tested by an accredited pen testing agency, not just clicking off compliance checklists. Thoughts?
What do you think, Herb?
I certainly, there basically what you're saying. Okay, so first on the mechanism, I think nobody that I haven't seen any public reporting on that yet, and so I don't know the answer. I'm not sure it matters much.
Yeah.
Okay. There's always ways into a system for a determined attacker, and if you delay them, which is a good thing to do, it would have happened next month rather than this month. Okay, so I mean, it'll eventually happen. So, in terms of increasing liability and imposing greater requirements for tighter security and so on, sure. I mean, fine. Do that. That's a good thing to do. And it will delay them. It will delay them somewhat. So that means we'll be having this conversation in July rather than in May. Okay.
Would we have this conversation in July versus May if they weren't such low-hanging fruit?
If you take away
the hospital instead of the pipeline.
I'm sorry, say again?
Would you rather be ransomwaring a hospital where the costs of patching are high, which is why the NotPetya attacks seem to hit hospitals around the world quite severely, versus a pipeline that might be able to patch more readily because they can take some systems down, get them patched, bring them back up, whereas in a hospital where they're already a bit strapped, taking systems down for patching might leave certain patients underserved.
I think you're asking me a question of, is it easier to do to do operational technology security in a hospital or in a pipeline company? And I think that in general, you're probably right that I think the implication of your question is that you're probably right that it's somewhat easier to do it in a pipeline company. But I mean, I think you asked me which would I rather have, and I think I'd rather have neither. Yeah. But I'm not going to be able to prevent either. I think at the end of the day in all of this, you're going to have to realize that all companies, all institutions, everybody is going to have to realize that they are going to be compromised eventually, and that they have to have appropriate backup plans to operate and to recover from it.
That's true. Yep.
So what do we know about DarkSide, the perpetrators of this? Are they as coolly mysterious as they present themselves, or is there any solid information about who they are?
I haven't seen any, I'm not, I haven't been probing this. But again, I mean, there's a sense in which I don't think it matters very much. I mean, it matters in
Well, it
detail.
matters if you want to arrest them.
That's right, and
It
that's
matters
right.
if
And
you
that,
want to
yes,
like.
that's correct. No, that's right. It matters in detail, but it doesn't change the fact that this is going to happen again, and some other stuff.
Can I make a counter argument that it actually does matter a lot?
Sure.
What the hell, right? So if this is like really just a cutout that this criminal gang is really acting on behalf of Russian intelligence services, and so then it would be really interesting that they are in fact probing critical infrastructure. But if it's just ransomware for service and some guy gets on and they didn't blacklist a lot of these systems, then it's like, yeah, it's a different kind of problem.
I think blacklisting certain systems at scale, or at least in a repeatable manner, is not doable and probably not worth it for a company like this. That's a lot of work. It would probably be like, oh, someone said, don't hit this hospital, don't hit this system. We promise, pinky swear, we will not hit that IP or, whatever. What has happened in the past, such as Hacking Team, which found itself in a very similar situation of, oh, these tools are only supposed to be for law enforcement, for national security, for catching terrorists. And then lo and behold, their client list is like Saudi Arabia or other Arab states that are going after people using their tools, and they get caught, like journalists or dissidents being attacked with Hacking Team tools, and they say, oh no, our customer violated our agreement. We will vet them much more in the future. Just like, did you vet them at all? Probably not. It's kind of that sort of thing. It's like, we have a committee that vets these people as our customers, and they pinky swear they will only use them for the bad guys. And then, they turn out to be using it to attack a gas pipeline in the United States or a dissident or so on. And then it's a lot of like, we swear, even if they were to try to automate, like, do not go after, infrastructure control systems, do not go after hospitals, do not do this sort of like critical infrastructure. It's on our system that they either do that automatically or by human vetting.
Herb?
Well, I associate myself with the cynicism of Deirdre. Yes, there's. As for Scott's comment, I think I thought the question was, did it matter what the nature of this dark side company was? And I agree that it has different geopolitical implications. If it's Russia doing this, than if it's some random profit-making center that's doing this because they want more dollars in their pocket. I agree that matters, and it might call for a different response. On the other hand, I think it's going to be mighty hard to prove that a state was behind this. And certainly, you can't prove it. I don't think you can prove it through technical means alone. It's going to take a SIGINT intercept from somebody, an overheard phone call from our spy in Putin's office or something like that, where they talk about how much they made off of this or something like that. And that you're not going to get.
I mean, generally speaking, what we know about the relationship between Russian criminal gangs and the Russian regime is that, like everything else that's tolerated in Russia, they are, to some degree or another, paying off the right people, and whether that means they are agents of the regime or whether that means they are tolerated franchises, I agree. You're never gonna prove it. To everybody who's saying we should bring on Katie Masuris, we have invited Katie, and I have been working to get her on, and we are working on finding the right date. Herb, we have more questions. In this case, a string from Alice Lee, who is also a cybersecurity professional.
Hi. So actually, Ox and I had a good conversation in the comments of one of them, so I feel like that question's been answered.
Well, but it hasn't been answered to viewers of the show,
Okay.
as opposed to participants in the Greek chorus.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the other question anyway. So it seems like, first of all, from the ransomware attacks that I hear about, it seems like a lot of this stuff is the low-hanging fruit of old systems that haven't been updated. Am I right about that? And do you think that that's inherent to the ransomware model, that that's just always going to be, that we're not going to see, zero-day ransomware, because we'll only see zero-day nation-state attacks, and we'll continue to just see ransomware always using the kind of known vulnerabilities?
Well, but even the nation states use known vulnerabilities too.
Yeah.
So I guess, it's a question of resources and so on. And the question is, will a ransomware perpetrator go after only unpatched systems? Well, my guess is that's probably going to be the case, because normally ransomware perpetrators are interested in money, and they don't care where the money comes from, and so they'll just go after the lowest hanging fruit. And if the lowest hanging fruit today hardens their systems and becomes higher, then they'll go after somebody else. The next guy on the list.
But that returns you to the question of why it is not in these companies' interest to be higher up on the tree rather than to be the low-hanging fruit. I mean, and I agree with Scott that they are not bearing the same sort of risk as financial services, but it still can't be good to be them this week. And the costs of getting dinged with this just seem way higher than the costs of maintaining systems responsibly.
But your subjective probability, your estimate of the likelihood that you'll be dinged is low. And you have lots of incentives to want it to be low.
Yes, except that your estimate, according to Herb 5 minutes ago, is wrong.
Should be much higher. That's right.
You should be estimating it much higher, and you should be calculating it in terms of whether it happens this month or whether it happens in July, not whether it doesn't happen at all. And you would think that whatever the consulting fee you would charge them to tell them that is a hell of a lot less than they're going to pay to DarkSide in ransom.
Yes, but there's some probability that I'm wrong, and then there's a probability that you've been attacked after you get that screen that screen saying you've been ransomwared. That probability of your having been hacked is high. So it's easy to dismiss somebody like me as saying, well, nothing, it's not a big deal, and it's unlikely, and they could hit other places, and there are so many other things that they could do, and so on. Okay, it's easy to dismiss me. It's hard to dismiss the screen.
There's also just like a fundamental feature of human irrationality, which is loss aversion. Humans hate to lose things for certain. They'd rather gamble on future success than pay something down as a certain loss. And that's what security requires you to do. It requires you to take a loss up front. And so lots of people will irrationally take a chance in the future, even if the expected value is less than actually paying it up front. And shareholders are the same way. Shareholders don't want to see those losses, those write-downs on the books. if it's a small probability. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of kind of explainable irrationality. So ransomware hackers are kind of hacking us as well as hacking industrial control systems.
I mean, I'm fine to call it explainable irrationality as long as irrationality is the noun. You can put whatever adjective you want in it. My point is that the behavior is fundamentally irrational. It cannot be cost maximizing in the long run, or value maximizing in the long run, unless you accept that Herb's and the entire security community's basic point over the last 30 years has been wrong, which is that, you know, cybersecurity matters. If you don't accept that, then I suppose you can say, actually, it's fine to not secure systems, and the long run value, you'll maximize your long run value that way. Otherwise, I can't see it as anything other than irrational, and I'm fine to put whatever understanding adjectives you want in front of it. It just seems crazy to me, no matter how sympathetically one describes the psychology.
Well, the role of the law often is to get people to act rationally in a socially effective way. And the role of liability rules is to get people to internalize their behavior. So even if they're personally irrational, they'll act in a socially rational fashion. And that's why I think financial institutions have been at the forefront, because they faced a certain cost.
Right.
And so they were able to pay it up front too. So that's, I mean, I'm a lawyer, so of course I would think that. But
you're a philosopher, though.
Yeah,
right,
that's true.
Yes, and that's consistent with my argument that the banks see a constant flow of dollars going out of there, and so it's in their face all the time, and so they're confronted with it, and when it's in your face all the time, it's much harder to neglect it.
Yeah.
Alice, your next question.
My next question was, do we keep track of how often ransomware keys actually decrypt things, and how often do they do that?
Your question was how often?
How often paying?
Yeah. How often does paying it help?
Yeah.
I think the answer is, I certainly don't know the answer to that, and certainly I know individual cases where it's helped and individual cases where it's not.
This is really bad.
Right. I don't know that anybody has kept systematic information about that.
This is a perfect example of what Akerlof, George Akerlof, called the market for lemons. Right. Because the ransomware people would love to be able to be verified that you'll really get the money, you really get the key if you give the money. The problem is that the uncertainty drives the ransom down. So this is like an example where the ransomware people wish that each other were more honest, because then they could charge a higher price. But since nobody knows, that's why. So there, I guess this is just my plea to say ransomware people, cyber criminals are victims too.
This is why we should legalize it, because then we could have an orderly market for ransomware, and that way it could be regulated, and you would know. And taxed, and that way you would know that when you paid the pirates, they weren't scamming you. They were actually going to deliver your ship back to you.
Yeah, or just have it like deducted from your paycheck.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, right, for we need national ransomware insurance. That's what we need.
Yeah. Alice, you have another question.
Oh, I was just wondering, do you think that had there been an answer to that previous question, I would have asked if it matters that ransomware is often like hack as a service instead of, so it seems like those kind of like B2B hack as a service providers are
B2B.
Yeah, have some incentive to make sure that paying it actually does something the way an individual actor doing a one-off attack wouldn't. So.
Well, but that means, by the way, I mean that means you have to establish some sort of reputation. That means if you have a reputation, you have to have a permanent presence, and if you have a permanent presence, that probably makes you more easily identifiable.
Yeah. This is, by the way, this is the central thesis of a great book that was just published by Jonathan Lusthouse called The Industry of Anonymity. What he points out is exactly what you were just saying, Herb, which is that on the one hand, anonymity helps cyber criminals because they're not detected. On the other hand, they need to be identifiable in order to generate a reputation. So it's a kind of constant balance to try to figure out how to be present but not identifiable, and that's what the role of cyber criminal marketplaces are. But it's actually a really fascinating topic about how criminals can exist in an anonymous space. It's not as actually easy as it might seem.
Did you say that there was a book on that?
Yeah, I strongly recommend it. It's also a beautiful read. Jonathan Lusthouse, he is a sociologist at Oxford University, and he's spoken to, I think, 250 cyber criminals and really understand how the industry works. But he talks about that central dilemma that you were just mentioning, which is on the one hand, you don't want to be detected. On the other hand, you want a brand.
Right. And do you know the reference to that? I'd love to see that paper.
Oh yeah, I'm typing into it's The Industry of Anonymity.
I think Alice just shared it in the chat, a link to it.
Thank you.
David Botts, the floor is yours. I see you have, as always, a new spread with the confused Scott montage and the fabulous tiny Lego piano.
Absolutely. So, Scott, thanks very much for posting these pictures because I expect that they will be memified for months and years to come. So I really appreciate it.
But thank you so much. And I can, I just make just one thing. I need your help. I need people's help. Herb, if you ever want to post that meme, I think your credibility would help it greatly. So please, go. I'm sorry, David, please.
No, I'll do my part, Scott. So,
okay.
Interested, Ben, in your thoughts, and Herb, Scott as well. What, in your estimation, are the national security policy implications of dealing with the variety of both state and non-state actors in the areas of ransomware, or you could say cyber crimes in general? Because it's hard to send a message to a non-state actor.
Well, I mean, isn't it a lot like the question of the extent to which we regard drugs as a national security threat? It's private actors, but it's right.
I think it's a little bit different from that because drugs don't. First of all, if you can attach ransomware to something, you can attach malware to it, install malware in it, and that disables it or frustrates its application, right? The ability to put ransomware on it shows access, and the access itself has national security implications that is not true of, selling dope. If you can cut off oil supply to the East Coast, that's a big deal. And if a Russian gang can do it, Vladimir Putin can do it, and the Chinese can do it. So I think that has, the access itself has implications. Secondly, I do think if you're thinking in a Weberian theory of the state kind of way, the ability of remote private actors to charge taxes on domestic activity is a big problem. It's a problem for the same reason that local domestic organized crime is a problem, except it's not domestic, right? It's not even our Don Corleone, right? It's Don Corleone in Sicily. And I think if you think about it from the point of view of any kind of theory of the state, that's a pretty threatening idea, whether you want to look at it from a Weberian perspective or a Hobbesian perspective, right? The Leviathan has got a leech on it and it's like draining a certain amount of blood. And then, like, the shark likes the remora, but the Leviathan not too fond of the leech. And so I think it's a pretty big deal, both practically and conceptually. And I will note that when I talked to the DHS cyber people on the Lawfare podcast a couple of weeks ago, they mentioned ransomware as low-hanging fruit that they wanted to deal with in an upfront push. So I think they see it in that framework too, as something that A, should be manageable, and B, a competent state needs to manage. But I would be interested in whether either Herb or Scott disagrees with me about any of that.
I mean, I think your point about being able to put ransomware in shows that they could have done other things too. So I think that's certainly right. And to the extent, depending on what they penetrate, that's bad. Now, question is whether you choose targets differently when you're doing ransomware versus a penetrating something for national security purposes. Maybe you are. I would imagine that if you're targeting for national security purposes, you have to be much more targeted. That there are specific installations that you want to get. Whereas if you're doing it for just to make the money, you're indifferent to where the money's going to come from. But other than that, the question that I thought was asked was whether ransomware rises to the level of a national security threat. And I mean, depending on the targets that are affected, maybe.
Kate Klonick,
Hi, Herb. Nice to see you. It's been we met once or twice, I think, at Hoover. It's so nice to see you again.
Kate is eating Nutella with a spoon. She is.
I was watching you guys, and it was like ice cream. I was just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna relax.
But
I'm not on screen today. But then you said that I had to rapture in.
Yeah, she's gonna close out the show today.
I found the bug I'm gonna eat, Ben.
Oh yeah. So yeah. Kate has to eat a bug first of all.
So hold on, I have to get it.
Oh, you're gonna eat it now? That wasn't really why I brought you on screen, but
well, I know
because I want.
Wait, here it is.
A cicada. No. No. No.
No. That. Can I just say something?
If your dried morels count, Ben.
You specifically said the dried morels count.
Can I just say that? Wait, this is just like we found a fake morel and she ate a fake bug. By the way, I have not forgiven you.
I know.
I want to. So, but
it's okay. I'll earn your trust back over time.
Does the
you think?
So Kate discovered something in addition to betraying Scott's trust and failing to eat a bug. Kate discovered something amazing today in honor of Janine. I brought her on so she could share it with you all.
Okay.
I'm going to put up a poll now about whether the fake bug counts.
Let me quickly pull it up.
All right, the poll is up, people. Kate will be bound by your vote.
I will say that I think that this went around. I think this was posted on Reddit today, and it was pretty well loved. But hold on one sec. Yep, here I found it. Okay, let's share my screen. Oh, there's really no good audio, but otherwise I would share audio. But
So
Can you
this
see
is
it?
bullfrog versus murder hornet, which all in lieu of fun audience members should know is an important subject.
This is awesome. This is the
Yeah.
best. This is. Oh, yes.
Wait,
Munch,
hold on, wait
munch,
for it.
munch.
Slow mo. I really love the commitment. I would be so scared if I mean I don't know what happens to the frog.
I think
Well,
the
that's the
frog
thing.
gets the better of the deal here.
I don't know.
Well,
What if it comes out of its stomach or something like later? We don't know. Like,
Can I just say something? What I really admire with the frog is the commitment to the bit.
yeah,
Like,
it's commitment.
Like,
It's all in.
like they were told, the frog was told, we're going to do a TikTok video, but you got to eat a murder hornet. And like, he
Frog
did
was
it.
like, I'm all
did-
in.
Yeah, I'm like all in. Didn't want to do it, but all his friends were watching. The toads were watching, and he had to show up the toads. And so, I mean, we're all laughing about it, but there's this frog right now whose esophagus is all
Who's
being
all-
stung.
Who's all of us? Thanks,
Oh,
Scott.
that's so true. It is true. I feel like I've been stung in my esophagus by a fake morel.
Herb Lin, you're a great American. It's great to see you. If you go morelling, we want a photo essay in PowerPoint. Scott, who's our guest tomorrow?
I don't know.
Oh, I should have
I
asked
don't-
Kate. We
Yeah.
have a guest tomorrow. I think it's I think it's Charlie Warzel.
Right, Charlie.
Who's going to show up the right hour this time. That will be 22 hours and 57 minutes from now. And until then,
We can't have fun anymore, but we can have Herb Lin, and we can have ransomware attacks on critical infrastructure.
yeah, thank God.